So where were Adam and Eve in the famous Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden? We're told that that's where they started off, and after the sin of the golden calf, they were kicked out of the garden, which for many people, there's this impression that as if it was a place somewhere on earth, this sort of tropical, lush environment, and that's where Adam and Eve were, and then they misbehaved and they were kicked out. But the truth is, they were at that stage in one of those four dimensions, which we refer to as the four worlds. And prior to the sin of the tree of knowledge, they were literally in a different world to what we are currently. But they were on physical planet Earth, and I think that's an important thing to know about these four worlds, is that they're not different locations, but rather they are different states of awareness. Remembering that the word olam, which is world, comes from the word helem, which is concealment. So four worlds means 4 degrees of how much God is concealed. When we walk on the streets, we don't see him. I mean, unless you're very observant or very spiritually oriented, you don't see God shining out from the billboards. You're more likely just to see ads for all sorts of meaningless things. So to speak about these 4 worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, is effectively to talk about 4 completely different levels of consciousness and of awareness, starting from absolute consciousness to almost no consciousness. To have spoken about Adam and Eve as being in the Garden of Eden was effectively talking about people who lived with a different consciousness of God. Think about it. They spoke to God directly, one-on-one. No sooner did Adam and Eve step out of line, God was immediately in the picture. Their mistake was obvious. That's not how we live. For us, we do things which are spiritually bad for us, and we don't even notice that it's happened because we're living in a greater helem, a greater degree of concealment. So to understand these 4 worlds properly obviously takes a lot of research, a lot of study, a lot of understanding, but suffice it to say that each one of them is a layer over the truth. The truth is ein oid milvadoi. There's nothing else besides God. We don't say in the Torah simply there are no other gods. We say there is nothing else. Or perhaps to put it this way, we always talk about God being infinite. And infinite is not a measure of space. Infinite is not a measure of time. Infinite means no finite boundary, not a boundary of space. There's no place where God is not a boundary of time. There is no time when God is not. And there's no boundary of concept. There's no concept or thing that exists that is separate from God. That's truth. Now, there are 4 levels of hiding the truth, which are called the 4 worlds. If we talk about our universe is what God made. It's where God changed the status quo. The status quo is ein oid milvadoi. There's nothing else. And now he changed that status quo and introduced the possibility of us, of a world that's not always well behaved, of a place where there could be crime, where there could, God forbid, be hatred. He did that by layering more and more levels of concealment over him. In fact, even to speak about the highest of those 4 worlds, called Atzilus, that is a layer. Because Atzilus is the place where you first discover what we call the 10 Sephiros, which is 10 different expressions of divine energy. So, for example, if we had to refer to God as wise, Chokhmah, wisdom, is the first of the 10 Sephiros. It's the first definable element of divine energy. But God is not wise. God is infinite. God is beyond the definition of wisdom. So if I'm applying a particular definition and saying God is wise, God is kind, God is a strict God or a vengeful God, as the Torah sometimes says, we're not saying this is the be-all and end-all, the whole picture of what God is. These are layers that he has placed on himself. I suppose it's a little similar to a parent, where a parent sometimes has to take on the role of guide, and sometimes the parent has to take on the role of grade 1 maths teacher. That doesn't mean that you are limited to grade 1 maths. It's what the role requires to help your child. Sometimes you have to take on the role of disciplinarian, not because you're a bad person, because you're an angry person, because you're a strict person, but because that's what the role requires at this point. In fact, on the contrary, you could be the most benevolent person, but you put on a layer called discipline so that hopefully your child will learn how to behave. The realm of Atzilus does not have beings. Nobody lives there. But what makes it a world, what makes it a level of concealment is the fact you're not seeing this blinding light of Ein Oid Milvado. There's only God, and He cannot be defined, He cannot be described. You're seeing descriptions. You're seeing Him behave in a particular way. You're seeing Him express kindness. You're seeing Him express the will to create. These are all elements that can be defined, which means they're not the truth of how God is. Now, that's a very high level within the 4 dimensions of existence as we know it, because that's a level where the only definition is God assuming defined roles. The leap from that realm of Atzilus, which is almost as if God is applying a filter to Himself, the leap from that to the next realm, which is the realm of Bria, where there are suddenly conscious beings who believe that they truly exist, that they truly have an independent purpose, that is the greatest leap in the entire experience of creation. It is called Yesh Me'ayin, where something should have no value at all, giving it a sense of self. And that becomes the realm of Bria. Bria is a place of consciousness and awareness. I exist, but I exist with absolute awareness. It's not like you ever forget that God is running the show. It's not like you ever forget that God is in charge. You know this. You live your life accordingly. You can never entertain the thought of stepping out of line. The greatest righteous people who walk this earth, we might call them souls who still live in Bria. They're almost like Adam and Eve before they sinned, before they were ousted from the Garden of Eden. They're living here on earth without all those layers of filter. Generally, in the world of Bria, you find the super angels. The world of Yetzirah, again, it's not a world, it's not a location, it's not a place. It's just another film, another level of fading the light of godliness that comes in front of us. And in that realm of Yetzirah, that's a place where you still are very conscious of God. You will never behave out of line from what He wants. But you really do feel your own existence. And the lowest realm, of course, is the realm of Asiya, the one that we occupy, which is not only a physical realm, it's a spiritual realm at all, as well. And that's a place of mainly feeling yourself and battling to discover God. So if you had a look at the 4 dimensions of these 4 worlds, they range from where Adam and Eve had an even access. In other words, the realm of Atzilus is even beyond the Garden of Eden. And then you have Bria, Yetzirah, that's sort of the Garden of Eden. In fact, even today when we talk about souls going to Gan Eden, those souls don't go away to some distant location. Those souls just switch frequencies to another dimension where there's more awareness, where there is more consciousness of the truth of God. And there's a lower Gan Eden, which relates to the realm of Yetzirah, where there's a certain degree of consciousness of God. And there's a higher Gan Eden where there is an even greater consciousness of God. That's the part of paradise, of heaven, which was reserved only for the most righteous of people. And that corresponds to the reality of Bria. Now, what we need to know for our discussion in the 5th dimension is that we live here in the realm of Asiya, which makes us very distant from all this great consciousness of God. We're a long way away from what Adam and Eve used to experience when they were first created. And to imagine that we would have anything at all to do with the realm of Atzilus is completely ridiculous. It doesn't enter our reality whatsoever. If we theoretically lived in that realm of Atzilus, we would be so acutely conscious of God, we'd actually become almost automated. What's going to be fascinating is to see that these are the 4 dimensions of where God has taken on some level of layer, filter, concealment, specific role. The 5th dimension lies somewhere beyond all of the 4 of those dimensions. And that's really important for us to appreciate, is that Atzilus to us sounds like the most amazing spiritual thing that exists, but we know we could never reach it. The fifth dimension offers the promise of reaching something deeper, more powerful, and ironically, accessible here in the realm of Asiya, in our day-to-day life, in a world without a consciousness of God.